Alexandra Eala from the Philippines. It has a huge win for her.
Look closely at the back of Alexandra Eala's visor and you will find 6 words stitched into it in Tagalog. Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. She said that phrase out loud in her press conference on Thursday, July the 2nd, 2026, after walking off court 12 at the All England Club and into a corner of tennis history that no Filipina had ever occupied before. The scoreline was 3-6, 6-2, 6-love. The opponent was Maya Joint, the Australian player who 2 days earlier had beaten Serena Williams. The tournament was Wimbledon, and the round Eala had just reached for the first time in her career, and the first time in the entire Open era for any Filipino player of either sex, was the third round of a Grand Slam. 24 hours before that, she had dismantled Renata Zarazua 6-1, 6-2, in just 1 hour and 18 minutes. She had not looked like a player spending energy out there. She had looked like a player saving it. Now we know exactly what she was saving it for. To understand the actual size of this turn, you have to understand where the ceiling used to sit. Before Wimbledon 2026, Alexandra Eala had entered 6 Grand Slam main draws in her career. She had reached the second round exactly once, at last year's US Open. She had lost in the opening round of 4 of the other 6. This past January, she walked into the Australian Open ranked inside the top 75 in the world, and walked out after dropping the first set 6-love, the wrong way around. This June, for the first time in her life, she entered a major tournament as a seeded player. The number next to her name on the Wimbledon draw sheet was 29. 12 months earlier, her ranking had been 140th. That is the arithmetic behind the turning point. The result on court is just the visible surface. Underneath it is a full year in which a 21-year-old climbed more than 100 places in the rankings, won her first grass court title, and quietly stopped being someone the tour talked about as potential, and started being someone the tour had to plan around. But there was a specific question the sport had been asking gently, and without any cruelty attached to it. Could she actually string it together at a major? Not for one round. Not for a single upset. For an entire run. Because her record, honestly read, was ambiguous at best. Her most famous win, the 2025 Miami upset over Iga Swiatek, had happened on a hard court, on a Tuesday afternoon, in Florida, on a stage far smaller than a Grand Slam. Her actual Grand Slam ledger up until this week read like a player who was still learning how to survive the approach into the second week. And then, this past January in Melbourne, on the very day the tennis season began, she was bageled in the first set by Alicia Parks and lost 6-love, 3-6, 2-6. Her third first-round exit at a major. A rough start to the season, and the doubt the sport was too polite to say out loud sat right there in the box score anyway. Could she close? That is the honest antagonist of this entire story. Not a rival. Not a villain. A quiet, patient question that had been sitting in the corner of her career for 2 years, waiting for an answer. On Thursday, on court 12, in a set nobody really expected her to win in the way she won it, she answered, "Start with the visor because she did too." She had it made with the sampaguito worked into the design, the Philippine national flower, the same flower she wore in her hair at Wimbledon a year earlier. She told the press she thinks it matters to carry pieces of her culture with her out onto the court, not as a costume, but as equipment. Where she comes from, she said, is a big part of who she wants to become. She said it plainly, without any performance in the room, in a setting where players usually reach for the safest possible platitude. Then she went out and played tennis that actually matched the sentence. Now look at the seeding because it tells its own quiet story. 29th seed at Wimbledon. It is the first Grand Slam of her entire life where she did not have to work through the draw as an unknown quantity. The tour had already reordered itself around her before she ever made this particular piece of history. That is a structural fact that tends to get lost underneath the emotional headlines. Before the crowd ever saw it, the seeding saw it. Before the seeding saw it, the ranking saw it. And before the ranking saw it, she was doing the actual work back in Manacor. The first round told you something very specific about where her game was at. Zarazua is a genuinely competitive tour-level player. Eala created 17 break points and converted 4 of them. She struck 22 winners to Zarazua's 11. The match took 1 hour and 18 minutes. She did not lose her own serve a single time. Those are not the numbers of a player fighting to survive a match. Those are the numbers of a player working economically, doing exactly what needed to be done and nothing more. And then, walking off that court, she noticed something about the crowd. A corner of Wimbledon that had somehow, on a Tuesday afternoon, in the first round, become almost entirely Filipino. "I was really surprised," she said afterward. "The Filipinos keep surprising me in good ways. I never would have thought that at Wimbledon I would have something like a home crowd." Wimbledon tickets are among the hardest to get in all of sport. That crowd did not gather by accident. It gathered because people had been waiting for exactly this. Take a breath here, because the next fact is the one that reframes the entire match against Maya Joint. Joint, Eala's second-round opponent, had beaten Serena Williams just 2 days earlier. A 23-time major champion. It was the result of the entire tournament up to that point. Joint arrived on court 12 as the day's giant killer, unseeded, ranked 87th in the world, but carrying a very specific kind of momentum with her. The head-to-head between the two of them coming into this match was 0 wins to 1 in Joint's favor. Joint had beaten her in the Eastbourne final a year earlier. This was not a comfortable draw at all. This was arguably the hardest possible middle round for a player who the sport was still quietly asking whether she could actually sustain a run at a slam. The first set went to Joint, 6-3, and on paper, and to most of the room watching, the question looked like it was answering itself already. Then the axis of the match moved. Eala took the second set 6-2, with aggressive returning, compact serving, a visible click settling into her patterns of play. And then in the third set, against the exact player who had eliminated Serena Williams on this same court 2 days before, she did the one thing a young player being asked to prove she could close out a slam has to do at least once for the answer to actually change. She won it 6-love. A bagel in the deciding set, on grass, at Wimbledon, against the player nobody in that draw wanted to face. That is where the emotional peak of this entire story sits, and it honestly does not need any embellishing. 6 months earlier at the Australian Open, she had lost the first set of a major 6-love. Now, at Wimbledon, she was the one delivering that exact scoreline, in the set that made her the first Filipina in the Open era to reach the third round of a Grand Slam. The bagel had been done to her once. Now she had learned how to do it back. Zoom out one more step and look at the shape of the climb itself. She entered March 2026 ranked 32nd in the world. 12 months earlier, she had been ranked 140th. That is not a spike. That is a climb, sustained over an entire season. The third round at Wimbledon is not some fluke result bolted onto one good week. It is the visible peak of a slope that has been steepening for a full year. Back in June, on grass, she won the Birmingham Classic, her first grass court title and the second WTA tier trophy of her young career, coming from behind in a 3-set comeback in the final. Then she came to London. Then she won her first round match without dropping serve once. Then she erased a set deficit against the exact woman who had just erased Serena Williams. This is a sequence, not a single moment. Now for the mentor question, because the framing around this story has practically invited it. Eala has trained since her early teens at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Manacor, Mallorca. Before Wimbledon even began, the academy, the same institution that has shaped her tennis since she was 13 years old, posted a message on its own social channels calling her journey from the Philippines to Mallorca truly inspiring and wishing her the best for her Wimbledon debut. That is the verified, authoritative voice attached to this run. Rafael Nadal himself has spoken warmly about her over the past year, and his academy has publicly framed her progress as one of its signature stories. But there is a specific piece of phrasing floating around the internet in the last 24 hours. The idea that Nadal was personally shocked by her Wimbledon run, that he issued some dramatic statement in the moments right after her second round win. That particular claim does not trace back to any verified quote in the primary tennis press, at least as of this recording. What is actually verified is quieter, and honestly more useful than a viral quote would be anyway. The Academy had already framed her Wimbledon debut as a story worth telling before she had won a single match there. Once she won 2 matches, the framing did not need to be adjusted at all. It just aged well on its own. The people who had watched her most closely over the past 8 years were the least surprised people in the entire building. That is often exactly what real mentorship looks like when it is actually working. Not shock. Recognition does. Oh, here are the stakes. And here is the room she has now walked into. Third round of Wimbledon. Her opponent is Iga Swiatek, the defending champion, a multiple Grand Slam winner across every single surface the sport is played on. The head-to-head between them coming in sits at 1 win apiece. Eala's one win, of course, is that Miami match from March 2025, the one that made every highlight reel of the year but did not, on its own, prove anything about how she would handle a slam. This match, the one on Saturday, actually will. Swiatek, in her own second-round win over Carolina, looked like herself again after a bumpy stretch of form coming in. Eala, asked about the matchup directly in her Thursday press conference, did not blink. "It is going to be tough for me," she said. "I'm going to try to make it tough for her as well. She has won a slam on grass. She has won a slam on clay. She has won a slam on hard court. So I am expecting a great challenge, but I think I am ready for it. I am ready to face it head-on." That is the sentence of a player who fully understands exactly what room she is standing in, and who is not asking anyone to make that room smaller for her. Zoom out one final time, because this is what this run actually means beyond just her own personal career arc. In the entire open era of tennis, no Filipino singles player of either sex had ever reached the third round of a Grand Slam before this specific week. Go back further into the amateur era, 74 years earlier, and you find a 5'1" player named Felicissimo Ampon, who reached the third round at Roland Garros. Since then, silence. Right up until Court 12, right up until this Thursday, right up until now. And it matters to say the harder part of this story clearly, because the turning point only means what it means if you understand exactly what it turned from. 6 months and 11 days before she reached the third round at Wimbledon, Alexandra Eala walked onto Kia Arena at the Australian Open, dropped the first set 6-love to Alicia Parks, and lost her opening match at a major for the third time in her career. Her post-match interviews that day were quiet and honest. The Rafael Nadal Academy posted a message afterward that included one line worth remembering. "Not all victories are won on court. She had a long spring ahead of her to get better. She got better. She reached a career-high ranking of 29th in the world. She won on grass, first at the WTA 125 level in Birmingham, and now on the biggest lawn in the entire sport. The bagel she lost back in January was never allowed to just sit there and be narrated forward as some kind of pattern. It was answered directly on the exact same kind of surface where it mattered most. So where does this actually leave her, and where does it leave the story? Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. That is the sentence stitched onto the back of her visor, in her own language, chosen by her. It reads now less like a slogan and more like a diagnosis of exactly what is happening in her career. She is no longer the story of a promising junior who once won a Grand Slam trophy in the girls' draw and might, one day, translate that into something bigger. She is a seeded player at Wimbledon in the third round, with a bagel over the woman who eliminated Serena Williams sitting on her ledger. She is 1 hour and 18 minutes of economical first-round tennis and 1 6-love decider away from arriving somewhere the country she plays for has never sent anyone in the entire Open era. Whether she beats Swiatek on Saturday is not really the point of this video. The point is the room she is now standing in. Swiatek is in that room. So is Sabalenka. So is Rybakina. So is the entire second week of Wimbledon. Alexandra Eala is 21 years old. She is seeded. She has closed out a set at a major 6-love against the day's giant killer. And the door she just walked through does not close behind her. That is what a real turning point looks like when it actually is won. Not a fireworks display. A hinge. Thanks for watching. If you want to be here for her third round match on Saturday, subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments how you first found out about Alexandra Eala. We will read every single one before her next match.